You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! Say it loud, say it clear. Refugees are welcome here. No Trump, no KKK, no Fascist USA, no Trump, no KKK, no Fascist USA, no Trump.
Thousands of people rallied on President's Day Monday in at least 25 U.S. cities for Not My President Trump resistance protests. From New York City to Los Angeles and many points in between, protesters reminded Trump that the vast majority of Americans did not vote for him.
Donald Trump is not my president because I would never have a president that would work to do away with Medicare. I would never have a president that would work to do away with Medicaid. I would never have a president that would work to corporatize and privatize Social Security. This is the start of a long march to D.C. and the midterms. This is not the end. This is the beginning. This is not the only rally. This is not the only group. This is not the only time we're going to gather together.
Trump resistance organizers are building a sustained resistance movement that they say will reach far beyond just street rallies. There are no official leaders. It is a people's movement. But the group Indivisible, launched by former Democratic political aides, aims to create a substantial foundation for a real sustained anti-Trump mass movement. They have created a resistance guide that's already being embraced nationwide.
Over 500,000 individuals have already downloaded the guide. Over 100,000 people have signed up in every congressional district in the country, and over 3,000 groups have registered in every state in the nation.
The widespread diverse movement started right after the inauguration with the Women's March. Resistance Recess is also targeting Congress with mass actions, in addition to the Not My President's Day actions. This is a people's movement that they say represents the will of the majority of American voters to resist Trump's agenda.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org. Brought to you by Union Active, your certified iOS and Android mobile app developer, offering high-quality, union-made mobile apps backed by a support team which upgrades your product to every new mobile operating system. Features, pricing, and examples are online at unionactive.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Education front and center. We're going to get to that in the second hour. The attacks on teachers, the attacks on public education. And, you know, are they making billionaire Betsy's life miserable? Are they making her sad? I sure hope so. Also, the big news yesterday if you didn't see it. Milo back in the news. You may remember Milo, and I'm not even going to bother attempting to butcher his name. I think it's Yiannopoulos. Evidently, Milo, you may remember from Berkeley. There was the big protest, and then the 150 people who were we don't know who they were, all dressed in black, who caused a bunch of chaos. Which I said at the time, I got to think Milo was a part of. Because his speech wasn't going to be anything no one's already heard, but to cause the stir got him a lot of publicity. Well, evidently that publicity, putting him even further to the center of the stage, well, it got a couple of people looking into Milo's background, and evidently Milo he has been uninvited to Crazy Pack. And look, I forgot CPAC was even coming up, the Conservative Political Action Committee's annual, they used to call it Klan meetings. Now they've called it CPAC. But he's been uninvited. Evidently, a couple of years back, he was doing I don't even know what it was. I wouldn't say it was an interview. It was kind of like there were like 5 people on the screen all talking over each other. But evidently Milo had made an argument for what I think society finds vile and completely wrong, and that is 13-year-olds engaging in sex with much older people, double their age, triple their age. He was making an argument for that, and actually made an argument for priests and young boys, and it was kind of a really bizarre. And I wasn't sure where, because I did watch it, so you don't have to. It was really kind of twisted, and not quite sure where his point went. I'm like, there it went. The point is somewhere gone. But, the flamboyantly gay Milo, who the conservatives embraced because he was, let's go do all these horrible things. Evidently, they're now kicking him to the curb because he's gone a bit too far. So I guess we have found the depths of where conservatism and everybody else kind of agree on something. So, pedophilia is where conservatives draw the line. And that's a start, right? I mean, we can build up from there. We can bring them somewhere north to sanity, but there's a start. We know that they're not going to delve deeper than pedophilia. Now, Milo is going to lose a book deal. I guess about $250,000 gone because, and I'm sure, look, trust me, Milo will be fine. There will be somebody on the crazy side who will say, here's a boatload of cash. Please publish your crummy book that nobody's going to read. And then, because here's the thing, CPAC, the reason CPAC's so important is this is where people like Milo and the whole list, the whole cavalcade of crazy, where they go and pimp and preen and sell their crummy books. That, again, people don't really read. They make the top 10 list because you get the Heritage Foundation and all of the sponsors, the NRA, and all these people to buy up large quantities of books at strategic times to put them on the top 10 list. I mean, that's how the game's played. Understand it. He's not going to get that. So uninvited to CPAC, which is pretty, in the conservative world, a pretty huge thing. In that arena, if you're allowed to speak at this convention, you are somebody in their world. So he has now been uninvited, or as the guy who's the head of it said, disinvited. And now the people at Breitbart, the workers at Breitbart, are talking about basically revolting if he's not fired immediately. So Milo went from superstardom to, yeah. But anyway, tomorrow begins Crazy Pack. 4 days full of hate and rage. 4 days full of how do we destroy the country. And the list of voices, wow. You're going to start off with, obviously, Trump and Pence to show you how much power this summit, this little meeting, this little get-together, the Klan rally, how much this really means. So you're going to get Pence and Trump. Scott Walker is going to bring his message, as will Ted Cruz. Stephen Bannon's going to be there. They're all going to have their and maybe even let little Rance Priebus speak. And then it gets into a whole bunch of, all of your crazy right-wing talk shows, all of your crazy, book deal people. And it's all about, this is where the trough is. And, you say you can't herd cats. This is the herding of cats, because this is where all the food is. This is where the money's at. And you look at the list of sponsors, and it's pretty amazing that, again, they really put on an interesting show, because we were there for the first day a couple years ago. I had done another conference, and it was in the same hotel, and it picked up the next day. And you just saw this just amazing amount of propaganda material coming in that they were just giving away. I mean, they were giving away all of these books. I mean, it was amazing. You just walk and pick up whatever you wanted. It was pretty incredible. And again, you go back to Heritage Foundation funds at the NRA, the partnership, the fueling U.S. forward groups. There's a number of them. ALEC, don't forget the American Legislative Exchange Council, Judicial Watch, there's a bunch of them. And these are huge money organizations. And the interesting thing to me is you go down the list of sponsors, and the money comes from the same basic sources, a handful of billionaires. And, I go back and I think about what has happened over the last, 30, 40 years, and the rise of these conservative groups funded by a small number of people. And this is why, there are those who say, we're already an oligarchy. Because look at how much power just a handful of people have to create this environment where really their goal, the goal of this conference, is radical change of what this country has been over the years. This is not about how do we make life better for everyone. This is how do we make life better for me, and the heck with everybody else. And you listen to the rhetoric, and look, there was a point at which the conservative action pack here, they actually were honest conservatives who, would hammer out ideas, but that was boring. We don't like intellectual thought. This is about radical stuff. This is about mobilizing and really encouraging the next generation by shaking the money pot in front of them. And I remember I had a conversation with one of the speakers who's on the list, and she told me I had gone to a talkers convention a couple of years back, and she said that she wanted to monetize not just every program and not just every segment, but she wanted to monetize every syllable that came out of her mouth. I mean, that's how far down they've drilled down the monetizing of this whole thing. And again, I come back to, it's not about good governance. It's not about how do we make this country better. It's about how do we make a handful richer. And, as I've said on a number of times in this program, most of the people who espouse this stuff, most of the people who spew this stuff don't really believe it. It's a good argument. It's a good game, but it's profitable. That's where the money's at. I've had these conversations over the years going, why is it that conservative radio is so dominant? Why is it that there are more conservatives on cable news? Why are there more conservative radio stations and TV stations? Why has the conservative message gotten out? And I go, well, because look, the reality is the billionaires are funding it. The people who have the money are funding it. And why? Simple. They want to keep the money. The investment that they make in this stuff, obviously they get a better return on from what they get outside of it. And you look at how much money they spend on buying politicians. We'll give a $20,000 donation, a $50,000 donation to something, and then end up with a bill going in their favor where they end up, pocketing $1 billion. I've often said, how do I get that kind of return on investment? And it's the same thing with this. They keep convincing us that we don't need to organize at the workplace. We don't need defined benefit pensions. We don't need national health care. We don't need strong minimum wage laws and maximum hour laws. And we don't need strong regulations on the job because regulations are killing us. Except for those people who die on the job that regulation didn't protect. And all while they're convincing us of all of this stuff that we don't need, they're running off to the bank, generally in Switzerland. So, when you stop and step back a second and look at the message that's going to come out these next 4 days, because it's going to be 4 days of one I hate America speech after another, and we're going to radically change it, but we love America. Again, wrap themselves in the flag and then talk about how much they hate it and want to change it, which is always just kind of bizarre to me, but that's what we're seeing. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to 4 days of crazy. Should be at least give me something to talk about over the next couple of days. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk with our good friend David Yankovic, the Southern White House. Did you sign up for it? I don't think. And can I get a tour? I guess maybe for some money we can. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Save the USA is drowning in grafted lies. Save the USA and resume the ties that bind. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job that you're elected for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1868. That was the day that the governor of California signed into law the 8-hour workday. The law was the result of a strong organizing effort led by California's trade unions. The call for the 8-hour day had gained traction across the U.S. labor movement after the Civil War. In the San Francisco area, the Carpenters Union helped lead the effort. Other trade unions soon joined the cause. They held a parade in June of 1867 that saw more than 2,000 laborers marching in the streets. The marchers were organized in order of when their union local had adopted the 8-hour platform. Ship joiners, bricklayers, lathers, and more joined the carpenters in a public demand for a standardized workday. The trade unionists also organized politically. They backed candidates to the state legislature that supported the 8-hour cause. Their efforts got results. An 8-hour bill was introduced. Sadly, it excluded agricultural workers, but the bill was passed and was signed into law. In San Francisco, the trade unionists celebrated their hard-fought accomplishment. Workers from Oakland sent representatives to join the parade. The law went into effect 60 days after it was passed. But like many of these early laws regulating wages, hours, and conditions, the law did not include the mechanism for enforcement, leaving an opening for employers to skirt the law. Soon after its passage, an economic depression further impacted enforcement, as hard times led many workers to take jobs that violated the law. Despite the legislative victory, the battle for the 8-hour day had not been won. The labor movement had to continue its fight for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So the tweet that caught my attention over the weekend, Donald Trump sent out, said, we'll be having many meetings this weekend at the Southern White House. He said, big 5 p.m. speech in Melbourne, Florida. A lot to talk about. I'm going, did we sanction a Southern White House? I mean, the Southern White House that I knew of was originally was in Alabama. I guess they moved it to Virginia. The old Confederate White House. I mean, did we sanction another one? And are we paying for it? Evidently, we are. Anyway, here to talk about what happened this big weekend. Evidently, I've been saying it's kind of like a timeshare spiel, but I've got David Yankovic to come talk with us a little bit about did he go? David, thanks for taking time for us.
Good morning, Rick. How are you?
I'm good. Did you make it to the big timeshare thing?
No, I I make it a point not to not to see him any more than I have to.
Because there was a, and I don't know if it was nonsense. I don't know if it actually came. I wouldn't doubt if the Trump people put it out. There was a Craigslist ad, advertising that if you came out, you'd get a wonderful little gift. There'd be maybe some cash vouchers for things that you could buy, T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And I'm going, it's kind of like a timeshare. You come out, you see a crummy speech, and maybe you get a parting gift on the way out.
Well, you have to fill those seats somehow when you have a populist message, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. And, I look at it again, and the crowd seemed to be dwindling a little bit.
Oh, they're definitely dwindling. There's a lot of people who are waking up now to kind of debate and switch that was done by Donald Trump. And the whole rally itself, that was his kickoff to the 2020 campaign. It was held by Donald Trump for president 2020. We paid for it. He flew from Air Force One 100 miles or 120 miles and came back on Air Force One. So, the thing is, for me, I don't even care. Like, normally I wouldn't, that, the president of the United States decided to, fly or do whatever. But I had to hear for 8 years every time Obama did anything.
Exactly.
So now I'm on it. Like, if you're going to play golf, I'm going to call you out on it. If you're going to go and, stupid trips and shut down New York, I'm going to call you.
And as we should. I mean, look, you're right. And I said this yesterday. Where are all the the fiscal hawks who are whining and complaining during the Obama years that they went on vacation occasionally? Not nearly as much as Bush went on vacation, and I guarantee not as much as this guy's going to go on vacation. But
so far he's already been on vacation 20% of the time.
Well, but to be honest with you, I would like him to be on vacation 100% of the time.
Isn't that sad?
It is sad. But I see the craziness and I see the dangerous stuff that is going on behind the distraction that is Donald Trump. I see all of this stuff coming around, and let's let him take 4 years off. We'll let him go and have a rally every now and again, as long as he doesn't get anywhere near a pen.
See, the problem is that he's not really the president right now. I think Bannon's the president. So if he takes 4 years off, they're still going to keep doing. They just need him for a signature every now and again.
That's what I mean. Keep him away from the pen.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because over the weekend, evidently, Mike Pence was in Brussels. You had Steve Bannon in Germany, and each of them seemed to have very differing messages. I guess Pence was out there saying that the U.S., has a steadfast and enduring commitment to the European Union, while Bannon in Germany kind of said, what he'd said a couple of years ago, that it was, failed and it was a flawed and all of this stuff. And you're really kind of sending these conflicting messages, and I don't think Trump knows where he is. Do you find this dangerous?
Well, it's absolutely dangerous. The worst thing to me was yesterday reading about the European Union speaking about Ukraine. And the United States wasn't invited to that meeting because no one knows where the heck we stand.
Right.
And, everybody in the world knows that right now we have a leader who isn't all there, who is baited with a tweet like Hillary said, or, thin-skinned or whatever. I almost feel like in a really dangerous situation geopolitically, because eventually someone's going to see just how far they can push them. And they're already starting. You have Russia up and down the coast. You have them firing missiles. You have North Korea. You have Iran. The sabers are already rattling.
Right.
We're in a really dangerous situation right now.
Yeah, say what you want about Obama and what his foreign policy. We didn't see Russian spy ships 30 miles from our coast during his tenure.
Well, that's actually not too unusual. Actually, the thing that makes it so horrible right now is all the other stuff that's happening in those areas. It's international waters. You'll see subs and things from other countries. It happens. This isn't unheard of. But the thing that is unheard of is it's sitting there for 2 weeks.
Right.
And and all the other stuff. I was looking at a plan the other day online, and they have like a military buildup on the Alaska border, which is crazy. Russia's got it's like 100 to 1 in the military up there. So I don't think that they're going to invade or anything, because that's not really Russia's mission objective. But it's really interesting looking at all the big picture of what's happening, and Trump's asleep. If you say what you will about Obama, but at least we had Dad home.
Yeah, it's a good point. Maybe Sarah Palin can see them from her window.
Yeah, maybe she's waving.
Jeez. I mean, we're really in a screwy time. Now, there was a story that just broke yesterday, I believe it was, that Trump's personal lawyer, this Michael Cohen, evidently he admitted that he met with with a Russian-born Trump associate and one of the members of Ukraine's parliament. But he didn't give him anything. There was no peace plan exchange, no conversation with former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. All of this stuff around Russia, all of these dealings, all of this, now we're finding out what we already, I think, knew is that, look, I think Trump's knee deep into this stuff.
The thing that gets to me is none of this stuff that's coming out right now. There might be like one new detail, but this is stuff that we've been screaming about for months. And they're acting like it's breaking news that's happening every single time. But, I mean, we've known the majority of this stuff. But this back channel diplomatic stuff that they're doing and everything, like, that's how wars start. Like, that's when bad things happen. When you have there's a reason why official channels do official things. Because when you have back channels and everything gets diluted, people start saying, I wasn't there and this didn't happen. It's dangerous. And we're in a dangerous place right now. And Trump's team is really, I mean, they're scaring the hell out of a lot of people because, I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I have people in the intel community and stuff who are just their hands are in the air. Like, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, because I was going to ask you about that because we watch these spy shows on TV and everything's through back channels, and how much of this what we're now finding out is just basically what happens, or how much of this is really new and dangerous stuff.
Well, I mean, I've never been at the level that a lot of the spy shows are, when they're doing that, but I can tell you that it's not normal. There's an official way to do things, and the president of the United States cannot be sending mixed messages to the world. They can't be having arguments with their advisors publicly on Twitter and doing everything else. It's all very, very dangerous. None of what is happening is normal. And they've been saying that's basically our slogan for our time now. This is not normal. But none of it is. None of it is at all.
Yeah, I mean, what's scary and frustrating in all of these things is that there are still people out there who think Trump's doing a great job because he's going after those Muslims, David. We're going to get them, and we're going to round them all up and ship them out of here. And I'm going, but look at all of the things all of the stuff all the instability, the mess, and to hear Trump come out and say that he inherited a mess. He doesn't know what a mess looks like. I mean, look at 2009. That, my friend, was a mess.
Say what you will about President Obama. He was great with the economy. And, I'm a big fan of his, of course, anyway. But Trump, he came into it easy. If there's a mess, it's because he's creating one. But I do kind of want to touch on what you said there about the White House, talking and stuff. The Muslims and the ban that's going on with that, they're getting ready to do another one. And it's going to be the exact same thing, just reworded. So he's going to get beat again. So that's going to be a good thing for us. But the bad thing is that he isn't speaking from the White House. So we have hate crimes happening throughout the United States, and Donald Trump is not speaking. He has the White House speak for him when Jewish cemeteries are destroyed or when, anti-Semitic stuff is done or bomb threats or whatever that's going on. He's not speaking about it. He's not saying knock this off or doing, nothing. And that's the message that, basically the white supremacists in America are receiving is that he backs them because he's not saying no.
Scary, scary stuff. And, I look at this and there's part of me that goes, how much of this is his want? Because I don't know that I believe that he personally is a racist or any of this stuff. And I guess you hear this a lot. I don't think he is, but he's surrounded himself with a bunch. So I guess that in turn, the people you hang around with, I guess it makes you one as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what our grandfathers taught us, birds of a feather, right? You are, your friends represent you and everything else. But, even if he's not, even if he doesn't have those views or anything, he has that base. And he knows that those people vote for him and those people defend him online. So doesn't that still do the same exact thing and make him the same exact person?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people, make the argument about Steve Bannon that he's not really a racist. He just, plays one on the internet. And I go, because he doesn't really believe that stuff. He just, it's good for business. And I'm going, but I think that's actually worse.
Well, I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people out there that are listening right now who can tell us about the psychology of the internet and how it makes you who you really are. when you wear a mask and, you can be yourself in. Steve Bannon is absolutely a racist and a horrible person. There is no even getting around that. With the entire alt-right is based on racism and hatred. And he said that his magazine was the vocal point of the alt-right.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary, scary time. So what do we do? I mean, I'm seeing all of this organizing. I'm seeing all this stuff going on, but I'm not seeing so much about what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia. I'm seeing a lot about the Muslim ban. I'm seeing a lot about, some of the women's groups coming together, but I'm not really seeing, or maybe it's just that I'm not looking in the right places. I'm not really seeing the kind of outrage I would expect over what the foreign policy of this administration's been.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that a regular average person can understand the intricacies of foreign policy. I will say that a lot of people are starting to, wake up to it and understand what that means. And I've been trying to advocate, if we're not back in Ukraine, this is what's going to happen in the United States. But, the average person in America, they don't think about, a country on the other side of the world, how that affects us here. I will say, I know the story is Russia, and I know the story is Ukraine because a couple weeks ago, I was posting left and right about what was happening. And the actual nation of Russia sent me a direct message on Twitter, with a propaganda picture, and trying to tell me that, Ukraine was firing on them. And it was CC'd with Vladimir Putin and the State Department and a bunch of dumb stuff. So that's the story. If they're going after a little guy like me in the middle of nowhere and causing noise, obviously they're trying to hush it up as much as they can.
Yeah, that sounds like a shut up before we come get you kind of message. It's like the fish.
I didn't take it that way. I took it as this is pretty pathetic.
They sent you the Russian version of a fish. No, but here's the thing, and you've been right all along, and I give you credit for this. I mean, the Russians wanted Brexit, they wanted Trump, they wanted all of this destabilization, and they've gotten everything that they've wanted, and we now have an administration that from if you read the reports, if you believe what's coming out in the news, that they've been in constant contact for months.
We know they have. This is not news. This is not something that is new. It drives me nuts. I mean, in the campaign, it came out. Obama said it. And, I mean, Donald Trump stood on a podium and said, Russia, if you're listening, hack your emails and release them. I mean, all this stuff happened, and it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
This isn't anything that's like, oh, my God, we can't believe this happened. For months we've known this happened. The outrage to me and to most of the people is that it's just breaking out.
Yeah, but
where was CNN a year ago when we needed them? Where was MSNBC and all the players, when we're doing debates and doing everything? I mean, they took it so easy on Donald Trump and they didn't vet him and they let him have a pass. And now we have a disaster of a president and we're looking at a really bleak 4 years.
Yeah, I agree with you, but here's the thing. You're absolutely right. Our media gave them a pass because again, they're a corporate controlled entity, and I love the people saying they're all liberals. I'm going, I'm not getting the liberal media thing. I'm getting the corporatist media thing because they puppy dogged after him everywhere he went just to get a quote, just to get a picture because it sold during the election. They were able to make money off of it, and that's really all it was about.
Well. This, our president of CBS, or the CEO, said it.
Yeah.
Keep going, Donald. You're making us money. And he said it publicly.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it was. Yeah. So I mean, that's what it came down to. It wasn't they're not a liberal media. They're not a conservative media. They want money, just like any other business. And unfortunately, media should be one of those things that aren't right now. That they shouldn't be allowed to. It's too important to be a profit. And that, I'm not saying to take away the free press or do anything like that, but what I'm saying is they should be accountable to be the the fourth branch of government. And, really it's a corruption thing. And that's how Donald Trump got in. And just like Mar-a-Lago this weekend and everything else, and I've been trying to tell the Democrats this for months. They need a permanent campaign. I told them in November that Donald Trump is going to run for president in January. I was wrong by a month. And that's exactly what he kicked off. I mean, the name of the event was Donald Trump 2020, and I told the Democrats we need somebody out there to do principal campaigns. We need to be, doing more. They want to focus more on, what's going on in Washington, and that's great. But There's a whole country that's happening, and people, are kind of waking up to the fact that Democrats only show up in elections.
Yeah. No, and that's a great frame because it's a constant campaigning. I got a question though.
Think about this. Think about this. Last week, Donald Trump took body blow after body blow after body blow of bad things that happened to him, and then he goes to a rally on Saturday, and all anybody talks about the entire weekend then is his rally. He starts a new week, fresh, energized, talking about the rally.
No, I mean the one thing I give Trump credit for, he's a master at changing the news cycle.
He owns the news cycle.
Yep. Let me get the last question I had for you, because I wanted to get your thoughts on his new appointment as National Security Advisor, this Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. I'm hearing good things. I wanted to get your thoughts.
He's brilliant. Best pick there possibly could have been. This is a guy who, he's a history nerd. He's the guy that he became an officer, and he basically took it upon himself to understand military history at the most basic levels. Even in Afghanistan and I think in Iraq, he took policies and things that we had done in the past, tweaked them a little bit, and tested things. And he's brilliant. What he does is study. He's the exact opposite of Donald Trump. It was a great pick. It makes me feel better knowing that there's a grown-up in the room now and not Flynn. No,
that's fabulous. But, here's the thing. How long, given what you've said, and I from what I've read, everyone agrees with you, how long does he stay? Because you're right. He's the grown-up in the room. How long does the grown-up listen to the child?
Well, I kind of wonder about that with Mattis as well. I'm hearing a lot of reports that Trump goes around, General Mattis. It depends on him. I don't know if there's going to be a moment where they disagree with each other and Trump's just going to dismiss him like he's done everybody else around him, or if he's going to be like General Mattis and kind of sit on his hands and say, I'm happy that, the president picked me.
Yeah.
But there's going to come a point where, these guys are too smart and too good for this. They should really resign out of this administration so it doesn't sink their careers.
It will be interesting to see. And like I said, I was kind of shocked that he chose somebody this qualified. Evidently, he must have filled out the form wrong.
That or, someone said, listen, you are having a really, really hard time right now.
Yeah, you need somebody who knows something. Good point.
Yeah.
David, appreciate the time, man. Always great talking with you.
You as well, Rick. Have a great day.
Our good friend David Yankovic. Check out his Twitter feed at David Yankovic. Also, he's got a great website. You want to check out the blog. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour news update. I'm Mark Boulanger. February 20th is the World Day for Social Justice, a day established by the United Nations to remind people that only justice for working people can solve poverty and stop wars. The UN agency focused on building social justice around the world is the International Labour Organization. Guy Ryder, a longtime trade unionist, is the Director General of the ILO.
As we mark the World Day of Social Justice, global economic recovery hangs in the balance. Tipping that balance towards sustainable growth and development means tackling social injustice. And my message today cannot be better expressed than in the words of the ILO's 1919 Constitution, that lasting peace can be established only if it is based on social justice. Today, there is a pervasive sense of deep injustice, that the weakest are being asked to sacrifice the most. Social justice is multidimensional, but as in the late 19th century, the world of work is now at the centre of discontent and must be an integral part of the solution in shaping a different, more just global order for the future. Social and economic inequalities in their multiple forms are rising. Some 200 million women and men are unemployed. A further 870 million women and men, a quarter of the world's working people, are working but unable to lift themselves and their families above the $2 a day per person poverty line. Some 74 million young women and men have no jobs. Youth unemployment is at dramatic levels in a number of countries, particularly in Europe and in North Africa. And the length of time young people are remaining idle is increasing, and the scars of youth unemployment, as we know, can last a lifetime. And in many countries, working women and men seeking to exercise their right to organise freely, to uphold justice and dignity at work, are prevented from forming and joining trade unions. Stepping up the global struggle for social justice is the right thing to do, and it's also in our common interest. And we bring our commitment to decent work for all to the global challenge of realising social justice and a fair globalisation.
One of the many groups using World Social Justice Day to fight for better conditions is an international coalition lobbying for fair pay for interns. One of the demonstrations in support of the struggles of unpaid interns was held in Geneva.
Unfair! Let me hear you! Unpaid! Unfair! Unpaid! Unfair!
Right now we're alive right outside the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. Each person is recounting a story of someone who could not do an unpaid internship.
We're going to come round and with the microphone just read out the stories, the testimonies of those people. We'll start down here, we'll just go down the line.
This message is from Karishma Tiwari from India. She writes, unpaid internships only increase the inequalities that exist, as they only allow students from certain privileged backgrounds to intern. Hard work and merit end up taking a back seat to income and background. I refused to participate in this system, which is so exclusionary.
This message is from Elsa Fernando from Spain. She said, I wanted to do legal monitoring, but I couldn't afford by myself all living expenses in a city like Geneva. Further, I was not considered as a worker, so I could not contribute to the labor system and working hours, and these would not be recognized anywhere. We are only as blind as we want to be.
This is about Kagu Kasavan. He's 25 and he's from India. And he says that he studied in Cambridge and he went into a huge debt for studying, and therefore he cannot afford to do an unpaid internship within the UN. And he also asked whether the UN lost its memory, because they actually said that no one should work for free.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm turning it up. It's getting cold in here, so fire it up. I got a bad
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Remember, Saturday night, Free Speech TV, 7 p.m. Our radio program goes to television every Saturday night. Free Speech TV. If you got DirecTV, Dish Network, or one of the cable providers across the country, make sure you check it out. You can check out freespeech.org for local listings. Good stuff there. Evidently, real quick before we move on, we're making hate great again. We're making beating up gay people great again, evidently, because what's evidently going to happen here, I guess, in the next couple of days, what is going to happen is President Trump is going to evidently, sign another executive order to rescind the transgender executive order that President Obama had put forth. So any protections to use the bathrooms, not going to happen. Evidently, that's again. But this was a campaign promise. So this is what he ran on. So we get. Well, I guess we get what we get. Anyway, let's take a quick break. When we come back, talk media news. Serv is going to be here. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1846. That was the day Sarah Bagley became the first female telegraph operator. She was hired at the office in Lowell, Massachusetts. Sarah spent weeks studying the electrical theory behind the new technology and began her job in earnest. She soon quit in protest after learning her pay was far less than her male counterparts. Bagley was no stranger to labor struggles. She was among the many Lowell textile workers who struck in 1842. Bagley was one of the founders of the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. She fought for the 10-hour day and better working conditions in the mills. Sarah also helped to found the labor paper, The Voice of Industry. When the Reform Association demanded state investigations into working conditions at the mills, Bagley stated, quote, "Is anyone such a fool to suppose that out of 6,000 girls in Lowell, 60 would be there if they could help it? Whenever I raise the point that it is immoral to shut us up in a room 12 hours a day, I am told that we have come to the mills voluntarily, and we can leave when we will. Voluntarily," she said. "The whip which brings us to Lowell is necessity. We must have money. A father's debts are to be paid, an aged mother to be supported, a brother's ambition to be aided, and so the factories are supplied. Is this to act from free will? Is this freedom? To my mind, it's slavery." Bagley returned to Lowell's Hamilton Mills after quitting the telegraph office. She briefly continued her activism until she married and moved to Brooklyn, New York. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So this week, I understand our Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, going to find his way to Mexico City to talk about, well, I guess the big, beautiful wall, I guess, walking away from NAFTA, I guess a lot of things. I'm going to be kind of interested to see what news comes out of that. But here to give us a little preview, we've got Talk Media News is Luke Vargas, who I guess is in Mexico City. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
You're very welcome. Good afternoon.
So I can't imagine that this is going to be one of those moments that Tillerson's going to walk into, or it's going to be all happy and hugs and kisses.
Yes, and I will also say he's going to be accompanied to Mexico by the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And I could not think of two members of this administration who you'd think would be really involved in the decision-making process, but time and time again have been revealed to have been basically excluded from Trump's inner circle. Not only has Rex Tillerson been undermined multiple times or contradicted by statements from the president, but we have seen reports from The Guardian, from Europe, in which policymakers within the State Department are actually reaching out to foreign governments and, in particular, sort of executive offices, heads of state, to try to ask them what Donald Trump is thinking, because there is so little communication right now between the State Department and the White House that it's, the thinking in the State Department goes that you have a better chance of understanding what Donald Trump is thinking if you ask, presidents of other countries who may have spoken to him directly on his direct line. And, Homeland Security wasn't even consulted about the executive orders on immigration and visas and refugees that they were going to need to enforce. So I think, yes, on one hand, it's not going to be a particularly warm meeting because of all the things the president has said about Mexico. But on the other hand, I just don't even know if the Mexicans are to believe that the people coming here to reassure them have any actual authority to be reassuring them about anything. They do not have the confidence that of Tillerson and General Kelly are decision makers within the administration.
That's scary because you've got your diplomats going to to do things, and if no one buys it, almost what's the point in paying for the airfare?
Yeah, and I'll say there's a lot at stake with regards to the Department of Homeland Security. There are hundreds of DEA agents here in Mexico. There are just as many Customs and Border Patrol agents who are training Mexican counter-narcotics teams and working with the federal police here to try and understand more about criminal networks that are existing in the United States. And as a result of these increasingly frosty relations that Washington has been pursuing relative to Mexico, the Mexican government now has threatened to end law enforcement cooperation with the U.S. And that could entail, I don't think they want to do this, I know they don't want to do this, but it's something they have to put up there as sort of leverage. That would involve expelling those American officials, and it could dramatically worsen the amount of intelligence, the quantity and quality of intelligence that we have about criminal networks in the United States. You would essentially have a situation where, if they're not sharing flight manifests, if they're not telling Customs and Border Patrol about the sort of criminal networks where they're passing through the border, our Border Patrol agents, and I know Trump wants to hire a lot more of them, well, their job's going to be a lot more complicated because they're basically going to be, encountering people coming across the border as if they just emerged out of darkness. And that's not the case now. I mean, El Chapo and many other people, heads of cartels here in Mexico have been apprehended on both sides of the border because of greater cooperation between these two countries. And not only do we risk a trade war, all sorts of other conflicts, areas of immigration, those don't need explaining, but really, threatening to end law enforcement cooperation is a very grave threat. And I'm not surprised to see Kelly coming here. But once again, what standing does he have to tell the Mexicans, hey, cool it, don't pull the plug on our cooperation just yet, wait and see what Trump does. Can Kelly pledge that Donald Trump is not going to say more and more incendiary things?
No, and that's a good question. And as the wall talk continues, and of course Mexico going to pay for it, that's got to be a sore spot as well.
It's not even a question that people take seriously here. I mean, it's one of those things, you can see editors back in newsrooms in the U.S. say, ask them about the wall. And I sort of slip it into my interviews, but I don't want to ask members of the government or other serious commentators here about that because I know their answer in advance. Mexico is under zero obligation to pay for a wall that they don't want. And as if, that needed to be codified any more than it was already obvious, there's a law going through the Mexican Senate that would prohibit the government from releasing even a cent towards such a project. So there's really no way that's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, I understand there's actually some willingness to renegotiate NAFTA. What are you hearing of where they're willing to renegotiate?
Yeah, you might know more. These are probably issues familiar to you because you cover trade agreements and know about sort of standardization of working conditions and workplace safety. We're told that the Mexican government is willing to basically do what TPP was going to have them do, which is sort of agree to some areas of workplace safety, some wage rules to sort of to come into international standards, which by and large they're pretty close to already. So the idea from the Mexican government and something we've heard a little bit from Peter Navarro, the U.S. Trade representative, who's going to be handling the NAFTA talks, is that he's probably going to try and take the language from TPP as it pertains to wages, as it pertains to working conditions, and try and get that into NAFTA. The Mexican government has signaled a willingness probably to do that. The other one where I think there's some trepidation on the part of the Mexican government is when it comes to state of origin requirements. You'll know this, but there's parts of NAFTA that say, I think it's 62.5% of the finished product you're making is made within the NAFTA zone, U.S., Canada, Mexico. Then it will not be subject to any border tariffs. Right. There is a willingness or a desire on the part of the Trump administration to increase that as a way of basically forcing international supply chains to be concentrated more and more within these three countries. That doesn't necessarily mean the U.S., though it probably would have the effect of bringing more manufacturing to the U.S., Canada, and Mexico altogether. And the Mexican government also seems to be open to this on principle. The question is really how far is the Trump team going to push it? Are they going to go over 80%? Are we looking at 90%? And I think the hesitation on the part of the Mexican government is if it gets too high, there's a likelihood that companies are going to say, look, we just can't thread the needle. I mean, we need a little bit of flexibility. We're going to aim for 80%, but, we're going to have every odd product, which might be a little bit higher. Maybe we don't need the Mexican manufacturing component. Maybe we'll do a little bit more of it over in Southeast Asia. And if they start running afoul of that and getting tripped up in tariffs on those sorts of supply chains, then companies might say, screw it, let's cancel our China, Mexico, U.S. supply chain and just move it all over to Bangladesh or China or Vietnam and just bypass the NAFTA, three countries altogether. And I think that's, again, one of those areas where Mexico probably is interested in exploring renegotiation, but they're nervous about the extent to which the U.S. might sort of just push their luck.
What leverage do the Mexicans think that they have over economic issues? I mean, for me, I know the agricultural thing is huge, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, really, the agriculture one is the one we hear the most. We already talked about law enforcement cooperation, which I think speaks for itself. Here we have a president who's saying he wants to crack down on, the opioid epidemic. What willingness is there going to be on the part of Mexican border officials to really just stop a cross-border drug trade that they might even be able to profit off of, just for the benefit of reducing, drug consumption in the United States? That incentive could be gone if this relationship continues to worsen. That is one area of leverage. And of course, that would, create a downward spiral for, crime and public safety in the U.S., which is one of the things Trump is promising. You mentioned agriculture. It just bears repeating that, Mexico is the largest importer of American corn exports. 27% of all corn grown in the United States goes off to Mexico. And that's very important, I think, because, we've heard so much from Trump about how he's focusing on the Rust Belt. He's focusing on bringing back manufacturing jobs, going into Appalachia, bringing back old 19th century energy jobs. And, here we are, with the possibility of a whole new sector of the American economy in agriculture and in a whole different batch of states being adversely affected. Should they decide, and Mexico could certainly do this, to say, hey, let's just, let's not import as much corn from the United States or any corn from the United States. They already used to have, before NAFTA, a giant corn production sector here employing 18 million people. That could be revitalized, especially if people are being deported back into this country. Cut out the U.S. and you're causing problems for a whole new sector of the economy that Trump would then have to respond to. So I think there is leverage on the part of the Mexican government. But at the end of the day, they're as clear as, I think, most level-headed folks in the United States, which is that there really is no benefit for having this alliance called into doubt. I mean, there's just so many more things that the U.S. benefits from when they have a good working relationship with the United States. And after all, members of the Mexican government I've spoken to point out NAFTA was a trade deal, but in many ways it was a geopolitical deal. It was a way for the United States at a time when it realized it was a powerful economy but had a ton of adversaries and challenges to face around the world. The U.S. was stronger when its immediate neighbors were democratic and prosperous, and it in many ways delivered that to Mexico, though it was rocky. Calling that into question now and, through deportations, the disruptions to trade, destabilizing Mexico, making the economy, putting it on the rocks, sending back a whole bunch of people, creating an employment crisis, perhaps increasing the urgency to want to then flee again to the United States, that does not benefit any of these three countries in the NAFTA alliance. So it's a pretty crazy time, and I think the Mexican government is very nervous. They just do not know if the floor is going to fall out of this relationship. They know Trump is bombastic. They don't know what to expect from him, but I think they're worried that areas of cooperation that have sort of just been a no-brainer in years past are now being called into question in Washington, and that's got them understandably nervous.
And they're not the only ones. Look around the world. I think everybody's
Sure.
a little nervous. But are they planning on, if Trump actually follows through on deporting 6-7 million people, are they planning for that many people to come back into their economy?
There is no way to plan for it. I mean, I've spoken to some people who say, look, let's say 50,000. If you get deportations of 50,000 bilingual Mexican Americans who've been living in the United States or even raised there, and the economy could absorb them. There's some sectors, tourism, call centers. They would like to have some more workers because there's really almost optimum employment here, optimal employment. The unemployment rate is very low, so they're looking for more workers. But after a certain point, this government just has no means to be able to respond. 10% of all Mexican Americans, if they were deported, would amount to 600,000 people, which would really just overwhelm government and civil services. So there is no eventuality for what really they would do in that sort of circumstance.
I'm looking forward to Thursday to see how this all plays out. Can't wait to hear what you find out as you're down there. All righty, Luke Vargas, Talk Media News Service. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! Stay proud, stay clear. Refugees are welcome here. No Trump! No KKK! No Massachusetts USA! No Trump! No KKK! No Massachusetts USA! No Trump!
Thousands of people rallied on President's Day Monday in at least 25 U.S. cities for Not My President Trump resistance protests. From New York City to Los Angeles and many points in between, protesters reminded Trump that the vast majority of Americans did not vote for him.
Donald Trump is not my president because I would never have a president that would work to do away with Medicare. I would never have a president that would work to do away with Medicaid. I would never have a president that would work to corporatize and privatize Social Security. This is the start of a long march to D.C. and the midterms. This is not the end. This is the beginning. This is not the only rally. This is not the only group. This is not the only time we're going to gather together.
Trump resistance organizers are building a sustained resistance movement that they say will reach far beyond just street rallies. There are no official leaders. It is a people's movement. But the group Indivisible, launched by former Democratic political aides, aims to create a substantial foundation for a real sustained anti-Trump mass movement. They have created a resistance guide that's already being embraced nationwide.
Over 500,000 individuals have already downloaded the guide. Over 100,000 people have signed up in every congressional district in the country, and over 3,000 groups have registered in every state in the nation.
The widespread diverse movement started right after the inauguration with the Women's March. Resistance Recess is also targeting Congress with mass actions, in addition to the Not My President's Day actions. This is a people's movement that they say represents the will of the majority of American voters to resist Trump's agenda.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org. Brought to you by Union Active, your certified iOS and Android mobile app developer, offering high-quality, union-made mobile apps backed by a support team which upgrades your product to every new mobile operating system. Features, pricing, and examples are online at unionactive.com.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So let me be, and I'll set you free. Oh, yeah. I am in misery. There ain't nobody who can comfort me. Oh, yeah. Why won't you answer me?
Oh, yes, the Billionaire Betsy new theme song. She's not happy. Evidently, Billionaire Betsy got the job she wanted, which is education secretary, so she gets to try all of her tinkering and all of her, hey, we're going to try new stuff. We're going to give people choice. Now, granted, we're not going to fund public education. We're not going to, to fund schools that need it, but we're going to try some new gimmicky things, and, well, we'll call it choice. But I still get a kick out of what we talked about yesterday. The big headlines over at the Washington Post. Critics want to make my life a living hell. And again, as I said yesterday, yes, actually, if you're going to try and pursue ideological aims that are going to make my kids' education that much more difficult and going to, ruin their opportunity, well, of course I'm going to make your life a living hell. I don't want you to be doing those things. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about this, the whole choice argument and all of that. I've asked Jake Jacobs to come talk with us. He's an art teacher in the New York Department of Education, also fabulous writer over at the badassteachers.org site. Jake, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem, Rick.
So, I look at this statement that, her critics are trying to make her life a living hell. And I look at some of the things that you guys have written over there at the BAT website. And would one say that you guys are the ones trying to make her life not so good?
Well, I always try to be civil and talk about policies and issues. So, there is a lot of people making fun of some of her comments, from the grizzly bear comment to her pencil comment. I think her first tweet on the job was that she didn't know where the pencils were, which was supposed to be a joke, but she's getting a lot of ribbing for sure from, I think, a lot of people that were typically not involved in education debates before. So, we'll take the support.
Right, and what I followed up with as a tweet: did you know where the bathroom is? Because you get these people who take over these large organizations who look, they don't know where the pencils are, they don't know what the bathroom is, but yet they want to get their hands in and fundamentally change everything that came before.
Right. I mean, it was only a couple of hours, or maybe even minutes, after she was confirmed that the Republicans in Congress submitted a bill that would completely abolish the Department of Education. So, talk about no confidence.
Yeah.
And that was after a rocky confirmation process where it seems as though she set all records for complaints by constituents that were calling and faxing and emailing and signing petitions and attending rallies in opposition to her. The Democrats said that they were flooded and they would give numbers. The Republicans wouldn't say how many calls they were receiving, but we saw 20,000 letters, 80,000 calls just from one senator. So it was, it was quite a lot. There was a real campaign, and that really brought her name into the public spotlight now.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, though. The Republicans don't know how many people reached out or tried to call them because they turned their phones off.
That's right, and they had to start sending over pizzas with a little note attached, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's a creative way of doing it. At least they got their message across. But here's the thing, and this is where the right-wing argument is. I can't tell you how many people have said, well, what's wrong with choice, Rick? Betsy just wants to give we parents the opportunity to choose what's best for our kids. And, that's one of those frames where you go, I'm not going to argue with what we all want, what's best for our kids. But, this idea of choice to me is kind of, a false choice because you don't really get any choices, especially if you're in a high poverty area where most of our quote unquote failing schools are located.
That's right. I mean, it's a setup. And, I got to admit, like teachers, we sometimes do this with our students, right? We'll say, hey, would you rather do this worksheet or that worksheet? And they're like, well, I don't want to do anything. I mean, it is, providing the choice that is the issue. And then giving people, A or B or C and making them feel like they're in charge is really subversive. And, this not only touches education, but it's the exact same language that they used when they took away the Obamacare Act. They're saying that they want people to have choices, other choices. And the same thing with the bill that it took away the requirement that a stockbroker has to work in the client's favor, and they're allowed to instead work in their favor. Well, in order to strike down that legislation, the Republican senators said that consumers want a range of options, and they want choice in the financial products that they receive. Really, the choice to be ripped off? I mean, seriously. So,
come on, that's freedom. I should have the freedom, Jake, to be ripped off.
Right. I mean, it's code. You know what it is. And when you hear a Republican or a Democrat saying school choice, that's code. That and that usually means that they've taken money from some giant corporate entity that is pushing some version of school choice. And it is starting to get a little complicated now because previously the Democrats had the charter school people on their side, the big backers And now some of those big charter school backers are upset that voucher school backers and virtual school backers and religious school backers are going to be horning in on a pretty good business that they had. The Democrats were mostly for public schools, but depending on your state, you might have 5 to 10% charter schools, and in rare cases like New Orleans or Detroit, you might have the majority already charterized. But now Trump and Betsy DeVos have signaled that they want to open it up to all of the above.
Right.
Anything goes. Like literally, like virtual online schools that you don't know, if there's a human being on the other side or a robot.
That's a good point. But here's the thing, and I think it's important to point out that almost 90% of the kids in this country are educated by public schools. So all of these gimmicks, all of these schemes, these are things that we're talking about a small number of students across the country, but a huge pile of cash. And it's interesting, as you've pointed out, that the divisions in what used to be a kind of a solid movement on that side have now splintered into, hey, we want more of that cash. And to highlight what you said, Betsy DeVos was quoted in the Post article saying, "I expect there will be more public charter schools. I expect there will be more private schools. I expect there will be more virtual schools. I expect there will be more schools of any kind that haven't yet been invented." And
right.
you listen to that quote. She didn't say anything about public school. In fact, most of the article was about all of these new inventions, all of these newfangled ideas of where entrepreneurs and the market can really shape education, and that scares me.
Right, and I really hope people know that a lot of these ideas have been tried. I mean, if she's talking about them as experiments. Well, let's just try some stuff out on live children and see how that works. We have a 20-plus year track record of charter schools already. And the same thing goes for states that have voucher systems in place. There's plenty of evidence on that, too. And, not a lot of it is great. The charter school people are, claiming the, superiority over their public school counterparts. They always leave out, that they have a much more motivated enrollment than the public schools. And they also leave out that, the whole idea of standardized tests is rigging the system because charter schools concentrate a lot more on the test. And, whereas, a public school might have a much broader curriculum, all they're doing is trying to get those test scores up 24/7. So, the testing, the standardized test, the Common Core, has all been used as a, intentional yardstick to try and make public schools look bad and to try and make charter schools look good so that we can open up more of them. And, and so now Trump, the disruptor, is coming in with a couple other ideas included in there, which are the voucher schools and the online schools and all kinds of new technology. They're talking about high schools that don't even have a building, and you're just out working in the world and all kinds of stuff like this.
So what do you say to the person, Jake, that goes, what's wrong with trying some newfangled ideas? Kids, and I'm even in sort of this school of, there are different ways, which is why at the beginning I was a supporter of charter schools, is there's a different way for all kids to learn. I'm an experiential learner. If I get my hands on it, I can figure it out. What do you say to those people that say, kids learn at different paces? Some kids are brighter, some fall behind and need more help. We need to be doing these different things, Jake. We need different options for parents.
Right, and so to those people, I would say, well, okay, I'm all for, doing research and piloting things and finding best practices. But my real question is, does it include taxpayer money going out into private hands? Right, that's usually my litmus test, because we have innovative public schools. We have specialized schools. We've had them for decades. We've had alternative schools. We've had them for decades. And my school in New York City is actually a school specifically for overage, undercredited youth, right? And we're part of a pilot. We're part of a program called PROS, where they allow public schools to do all kinds of flexible things with their schedule and with the ways that they teach, just like charter schools do, except we are union schools and we're in the public school system, and so there's absolutely no need to hire outside consultants or to have a CEO making $500,000 or, or even to use standardized tests, so the question for me is always whether it involves, some kind of payday for Pearson or Wall Street investors. That's my test.
But here's the thing, and look, I'm right there with you. Absolutely, the profit motive to me is a problem. But there are some who believe that nothing can get done, Jake. Nothing ever happens without a profit motive, and that incentive and education they believe is part of that.
Well, education, I believe, should be completely independent of that. I mean, once you have somebody that's in it for the money, I mean, you ask teachers. I mean, we have teachers that respond to surveys in mass proportions saying that it's more important for them to have working conditions improved than to have a pay raise. And, that's proof that they're really not in it for the money. They're really in it to help kids and to, just have the kind of career that they like, working with kids and, having a stable middle-class life. If you start bringing in this mentality of, you can make more money if you do this. What it's going to be is people going after the brightest kids, working only in the best neighborhoods, and just completely ignoring all of the really high-need kids that need the most help.
Yeah, well, I just had this exact conversation this past weekend with someone who said, well, the local Catholic high school has a much better graduation rate than the local public school. And I said, do you know why? Because before they get to their senior year, they're usually thrown out of the Catholic school and back to the public school because they're able to cherry pick. And,
right.
If we want to talk about, real graduation rates, we can talk about areas and stuff like that. But don't compare, apples and rotten oranges.
Right. And also before the kids even get into those schools, it's more likely that if they could afford private school tuition, that their families are more affluent, and they're committed and they're involved. And so, it's really, the problem in these struggling schools, it's really, based on zip code, it's inner city problems. It's the kind of things, that you really can't solve with an academic instructor. It's the kind of things that you need a clinician or a counselor or a social worker, to try and help those kids to get them ready to learn, because, it's not like they're really trying their best and they just can't do well. It's like a lot of these kids are, high needs or disruptive or disabled, or they don't speak English, and they're not really ready, for what we're putting in front of them, which is, a standardized test that's based on their age and has nothing to do with their functional ability.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. But, back to the conversation I had over the weekend, I think what a lot of parents, especially the people who preach the choice thing, a lot of them think that, if we go this route, if we open it up to choice, I'm going to get to be able to have the choice to send my kids to that Catholic high school or to that elite prep school or private school like Obama's kids went to and Rahm Emanuel's kids went to. And there's this thought that, this could be the golden ticket. This could be us getting into those schools. And that's not even close to the reality of what this stuff would do.
Right. Well, the really insidious thing is that it kind of, it takes a parent, their love for their child and their hope, that their child has every advantage and every opportunity, and it turns out against the larger system, right? I mean, charter school parents are generally happy, but when you ask them, well, what about the fact that, you kind of abandoned the public school system and now, there's one less bright kid in there, that's helping out and, that's part of the socializing experience and part of the academic experience. It's just like the idea of running an economy based on, lotteries where you have a few people that win big and everybody else can just pound sand.
Yeah.
And so, that's where you need to look, at examples like Finland, where, they really stress equity and they really don't want to have winners and losers. You want to have everybody kind of, rise up. And then when they do identify schools that have particular problems, they allocate more resources, not less. Here in the U.S., when we have a struggling school, it gets punished. It comes under scrutiny. It may get closed down. You might have, changes. And, are they really supporting, the kids to try and improve? It's really no. They want to change it. They want to privatize it or close it down, or give the space to somebody else.
It's the last question I've got for you. Outside of the distraction of finding pencils and grizzly bears and all of that stuff, what should people be looking for coming out of this Department of Education? What are you paying attention to?
Well, here in New York, we have a really big opt-out movement. It's actually been more than 20% of the state for the last 2 years. And so it's a real question mark what the Trump administration, what Trump and DeVos want to do about the standardized tests that are coming up. Trump campaigned that he was against Common Core and he wanted to end it. But Betsy DeVos hasn't said anything so far about the testing and the 95% participation rate. So we really don't know what's coming, other than the fact that they want to increase charter schools and privatize, and sap away money and resources from public schools. So we're really gearing up for a fight, and we're going to have to be ready to be flexible, depending on what they want to do. I mean, downsizing what the federal education department has been doing around testing would be welcome, I think, from progressives to right wing and everybody in between. So that's where Trump could really make some inroads if he's listening.
Yeah, but I don't think she will, because this is a huge profit center.
Right, and she's been behind it her whole career. It stands to reason that the reason she was picked is because she's a big reform pusher, and that the education reform policies have been used to create the narrative that the public schools are failing, and that it's time to replace them.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of work to do. Jake, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for the great work you do over at the Badass Teachers site. Keep up the good work.
No problem. You too, Rick. Thanks a lot.
Great talking with you, Jake Jacobs. If you want to check out some of his writing, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on his name, take you right there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1868. That was the day that the governor of California signed into law the 8-hour workday. The law was the result of a strong organizing effort led by California's trade unions. The call for the 8-hour day had gained traction across the U.S. labor movement after the Civil War. In the San Francisco area, the Carpenters Union helped lead the effort. Other trade unions soon joined the cause. They held a parade in June of 1867 that saw more than 2,000 laborers marching in the streets. The marchers were organized in order of when their union local had adopted the 8-hour platform. Ship joiners, bricklayers, lathers, and more joined the carpenters in a public demand for a standardized workday. The trade unionists also organized politically. They backed candidates to the state legislature that supported the 8-hour cause. Their efforts got results. An 8-hour bill was introduced. Sadly, it excluded agricultural workers, but the bill was passed and was signed into law. In San Francisco, the trade unionists celebrated their hard-fought accomplishment. Workers from Oakland sent representatives to join the parade. The law went into effect 60 days after it was passed. But like many of these early laws regulating wages, hours, and conditions, the law did not include the mechanism for enforcement, leaving an opening for employers to skirt the law. Soon after its passage, an economic depression further impacted enforcement, as hard times led many workers to take jobs that violated the law. Despite the legislative victory, the battle for the 8-hour day had not been won. The labor movement had to continue its fight for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen! Hey, mama, look at me! I'm on my way to the promised land. Woo! I'm on the highway to hell.
Poor Betsy. Poor Betsy DeVos. Poor billionaire. Taking a lot. You know, claims her critics want to make her life miserable, claims they want to make things difficult on poor Betsy. And I find it ironic that this is a person who's probably never had a hard, or really an honest, hard moment in her life, and now not able to figure it out. But like we talked about yesterday, I'm still trying to grab my head around the reporting that came from the Jefferson Middle School Academy, where she was blocked from the doors, where she stood on the steps and said, "The teachers here, they're awesome. The school's awesome." And then she was interviewed a couple of days later, basically slapping them in the face, saying that the teachers were all in receive mode, that they wanted to be told what to do. And then the quote that grabbed me is when she said, "You have to have teachers who are empowered to facilitate great teaching." And I'm going, that's exactly what unions do and help teachers feel empowered. Not all of this standardized testing, not all of this micromanaging, not all of this top-down stuff. And look, the reality is what's happened with education is that kind of insane micromanaging that we really need to be pushing back against. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about billionaire Betsy and education as a whole, I've asked Michelle Strader-Gunderson to come talk with us. She's a first-grade teacher there in the Chicago Public School District, also one of the great badass teachers. Michelle, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you very much, Rick, and thank you also for how much you support the teachers in Chicago. I especially remember your reporting during our strike.
Yeah, we were there when Chewy was running for mayor and had an awful lot of really good times talking with teachers. But here, look, Chicago, our inner cities where I grew up in Cleveland, these are the ground zero places of the attacks on education. This is where the war is beginning.
Exactly, and it's a war in what I would consider on other people's children. Looking at educators and blaming teachers for vast poverty and the devastation of neighborhoods and schools.
No, I mean, it's insane. But what do you say to this comment from Betsy DeVos that that teachers have to be empowered to facilitate great teaching?
Well, it's really loaded, isn't it? Because on several dimensions. First of all, as women, the system infantilizes us, and we have patriarchal bosses. Even our female bosses many times are patriarchal. And so when she says that we need to be empowered, she's actually implying, that we're weak, and we are not. There have been teachers speaking up and asking for what's right for children for a very long time. So I find the statement insulting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and also, when we look at her pop-in to Jefferson School, she doesn't understand the nature of our work. And a short visit would give no one an idea of what's actually happening inside a school. So not only was it a belittling statement, it wasn't a statement that was built on any kind of knowledge.
And for those who say that she shouldn't be in that position because she has no experience whatsoever, I mean, absolutely. I mean, she hasn't even taught, probably the guy cutting the grass, which way she wants things to go, let alone children and the whole system. And now she's in charge. She's in charge of a massive system.
She's in charge of a massive system, but she's also been on the side of dismantling public schools. And, we had Arnie Duncan, who was awful in his own right, incredibly awful. And he knew enough about schools to know how to go about dismantling them, in my opinion. So her experience is disconcerting.
Right.
Her
So let me
lack of
ask you this then,
experience is
since you
disconcerting.
brought Duncan into this, and obviously, Obama was not, in my view, a great president for education, because King followed him. So if I'm getting this right, and I kind of agree with it, if this is where you're going, the fact that Duncan actually knew the system made him much more dangerous than someone who doesn't, because she's going to fumble and kind of, maybe not be able to find the pencils or the grizzly bears to be able to cause any real damage. Is that kind of the thought?
No,
Okay.
I think she's equally bad, just ignorant at it, and but also she's so much more ideological than he was.
Right.
And she is basing what she does on an ideology that does not honor public schools or the civil rights of children with special ed. And what she has supported through her lifetime in education and the words that come from her mouth, I think we should take as credible threats. I do think she does not have the skills for the office. Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that the people she brings on won't.
Right.
And I think she's ignorantly dangerous.
Yeah, that's the scary part in all this. But again, you look at the Trump administration, and that seems to be the ignorantly dangerous seems to be what maybe will be on their tombstones at the end of all of this.
Yeah. So dumb that they're a threat.
No, I mean, it's scary stuff. But here's the thing, and this is not new. This attack on public school teachers, attack on people like you, this isn't new. And all of the different gimmicks and schemes to blame you and to demonize and all of that. This isn't new stuff, though, right?
No, it's not, and it's taken a long time for this to happen. A lot of it goes to the testing that you talked about in the opening of your show, and the idea that you can measure knowledge, first of all, and that measuring that knowledge can be attached to an educator's worth. What we see is a measure to manage type of business model that's a lot like Taylorism. And children are not widgets, and knowledge is not linear. A growth model on knowledge is just impossible to design in terms of testing. And so the whole scheme is built on this false idol of testing.
Yeah, and again, as a parent, I want to know that my kids are learning. I want to know that they're succeeding. But this testing fetish has gotten a little bit out of hand.
It has, and I think also the demonization of teachers has a lot to do with the war on workers in general. Now, it used to be, when this is my 30th year of teaching, Rick, and when I entered the profession, that you had a teaching degree and a certain set of skills and knowledge that you went through the 8-hour interview I went through to become a teacher. I'm alluding to Betsy DeVos's 3-hour hearing. There was an assumption of professionalism. And now I find in the new evaluation systems that have been rolled out and in test scores being attached to my teaching that the professionalism is not assumed. I have to prove it all the time.
Right. Well, I mean, I've been saying for a while they're trying to turn your profession into basic factory work. Assembly line work, where we've got all these little widgets coming down the assembly line, and all you have to do is follow the flow chart like we see from the Teach for America model, and everything will be fine.
And I honor everybody's work, and I honor the type of work and stamina that it takes to provide a household for people doing factory work. I want the nature of my work honored as well, what it takes to go into it, what it means to be a worker. I have no need to separate myself from my fellow humans in terms of class or professionalism. I want all of us to be honored as workers.
I'm with you. The idea that all work is valued is really important to me. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Michelle Strader-Gunderson. She's written some great stuff over at the Badass Teachers website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. The one piece that I wanted to bring up, Michelle, is evidently you got fired? What's up with that? I was fired today? What's going on?
I wrote a piece called I Was Fired for a Day, talking about the furloughs in Chicago. The teachers of Chicago were furloughed for 4 days so far this year, and they are all non-teaching days. They are all the days that we do our professional development and take care of planning and
all the work
planning is the biggest part, but all the work that we do in order to take care of children.
So you probably did it anyway, just didn't get paid for it.
Well, that's a really good point, Rick. The work did not go away. And we were not allowed in our buildings. We were not paid for that day, yet our grades were still due on Monday. And in my particular situation, I teach an inclusion class that's special education and general education mixed together. And the co-teacher and I needed that time to collaborate for me to see her evaluation process and grades and for her to see mine so that we could generate the quarterly grades for our students along with the narratives. And that incredibly important time was taken away from us. We also spend that time to plan together to project for the upcoming quarter. So there's a theme to this show, Rick, already. The nature of our work and what we do on those days was not honored. It also, from the boss's standpoint, because they are non-attendance days for students, it didn't get the populace riled up because their children were going to be off of school that day anyway.
Right.
So the fired for a day was an inflammatory headline, but my work was not wanted, and I was not paid for a day that I had been contracted. To me, that's being fired.
Yeah, well, or laid off. So file for unemployment.
Right.
I mean,
exactly. And so when we see Betsy DeVos going into a school and saying, well, we need teachers empowered, what the best research in teaching tells us is teachers are empowered when they have time to collaborate and plan together.
And all the enrichment and all the development and all of that stuff that comes along with it.
Absolutely. And the time to think about individual children. The power comes from the needs of the children right in front of us, not in a standardized test. And that essentially was taken away from us. So when you talk about a factory model of teaching, what we are seeing is the bosses not understanding what it takes to do what we do.
And that comes right from the top. I mean, we now, I think, admittedly have a Secretary of Education who has not a clue. And is this unusual? I mean, I know her confirmation was, well, historic in that the vice president had to cast the deciding vote. But is this a position that that has had someone this unqualified lead it?
Well, no. I mean, Margaret Spellings under Bush was pretty bad too. But as we said in the earlier in the program, Margaret Spellings didn't come into the office hoping that there would only be school choice, hoping that that creationism would be a choice taught in some schools, hoping for voucher systems, which it really is just a type of systematic payout for wealthy people to go to private schools.
Right.
There hasn't been anybody with an all-out destructive agenda like this.
Yeah, so this is truly historic then.
Well, and then, I think that when you were talking about she probably has never known hardship, there's incredible arrogance as well. Because, sure, we have had people who were just as unqualified as Betsy DeVos. I would say that Margaret Spelling, when you looked at her qualifications, the paragraph about her on the website said that she's uniquely qualified to be Secretary of Education because she's been a mother. I mean, it was just dreadful.
Yeah.
And Betsy DeVos she's uniquely qualified because she's tutored some kids. But
she's uniquely qualified because she bought off a bunch of lobbying firms and created a bunch of funds and front groups designed to destroy education, not actually do it.
But and then let's look at the arrogance of her hearings. Everybody else who's come into that position at least was prepared. They at least had some understanding of how the Department of Education works. They had some understanding of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education and special education law. She was a deer in headlights for most of the session, and she hadn't bothered to do any homework or any preparation. That, to me, is just sheer arrogance.
It's scary, scary stuff. Last question I've got for you, and looking at all of this, and it's kind of the what do we do? Kind of what do you think needs to be done?
I think that first of all, growing our union stronger at the local level and stronger at the building level, to me, is the answer for myself personally. I have a very strong union building where teachers collaborate, support each other, and run the programming of our school. And when I see what happened at Jefferson Middle School, when parents were outside protesting, and our national union leadership said no Secretary of Education should be blocked from a school, I have to say I disagree incredibly with that statement. Those parents deserve to hold on to the culture in school and cornerstone of their community, and they are facing an existential threat to what they have built for their children when a person such as DeVos comes to visit their school. And I also believe those parents have a right to say, you may not use my child as a photo op for your continued campaign to destroy schools.
Excellent point. Michelle, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the fight. I look forward to talking to you again.
You bet. Bye-bye, Rick. Thank you for everything you do.
Thanks so much. Great talking with you, Michelle Strader-Gunderson. Again, if you want to check out her writing, we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Michelle's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Across the United States, workers enjoy the first Monday of September as their holiday. Labor Day has become known as a day for family picnics and community parades. But do you know how Labor Day really started? Labor Day was first officially recognized on this day in labor history. The year was 1887. At the request of union members and workers, several states had started discussing setting aside a working man's holiday. In 1882, the Central Labor Council of New York City held the very first Labor Day parade. That first parade saw some 10,000 workers proudly marching in the streets. 5 years later, on this day in labor history, Oregon became the very first state to officially declare such a working man's holiday. Also that year, Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York followed. By 1894, a total of 30 states across the nation had passed legislation for a similar celebration for workers and their valuable contributions to society. That same year, the federal government declared the first Monday of September officially Labor Day. Some critics in the labor movement have noted that Labor Day served as a more benign alternative to May Day. May Day is considered a more radical workers' holiday commemorating the 1892 Haymarket Martyrs Massacre in Chicago and the struggle for the 8-hour workday. May Day is celebrated by workers throughout much of the world. Recently, May Day marches and protests have seen a resurgence in the United States, especially around issues of immigrants' rights. Whether workers gather in September or May, it is an important time to remember our shared history and our continued struggle. United we bargain, divided we beg. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
For nearly half a century now, America's middle-class working families have been pummeled by corporate greedmeisters and their political henchmen. Indeed, in just the last decade, the typical median income family has lost 60% of their wealth. Haven't they been punished enough? No, says House Speaker Paul Ryan. Along with other top Republican leaders of Congress, he intends to slash the Social Security money that middle-class and low-income workers depend on, and he ultimately is out to kill it altogether. Dependence on such public entitlements, he preaches, weakens our national morality. Entitlements? Social Security isn't a welfare program. Regular working people pay a 12% tax on every dime of their wages into this public pension fund year after year. They earn their retirement. Morality? Social Security embodies America's core moral values of fairness and our society's commitment to the common good. And it works. Before it was enacted, half of all Americans spent their golden years in poverty. Social Security has saved the great majority of us from old age penury. Where is the morality in taking this earned retirement and modicum of dignity away from millions? Besides, a sermon on the morality of entitlements should never come from a Congress critter's mouth. Speaker Ryan himself wallows in a mud pit of congressional entitlements that working stiffs couldn't imagine getting. A $223,000 annual paycheck, free limousine and chauffeur, a maximum coverage health plan, a tax-paid PR agent, lavish expense account, free travel, and, of course, a platinum-level congressional retirement program funded by the very taxpayers whose Social Security he's out to kill. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet Ryan wonders why Congress's public approval rating is plummeting.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Lots of comments coming in on the Twitters on the education issue. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, as I've said a gazillion times, as a parent, we want the best. We want what's best for our kids. We want to make sure that the education they get is going to serve them for a lifetime, going to teach them how to learn, going to help them become critical thinking citizens. I think at least I hope we all have that kind of thought for our kids. What kind of is worrisome is when you look at someone like Betsy DeVos and really the world that she's created, because this is the billionaires thinking that they know what's best. And really what is best is what they give to their children. Honestly, I mean, it's honestly and truthfully what their kids get is the best. Now, that's not what they're advocating for the rest of us. No. Because if really, honestly and truthfully, if you wanted to have the best education system possible, you would limit the class size to 12 to 15. You wouldn't have 20, 30, 40, 50 kids in a classroom. You'd have 12 to 15. Or in some of the more elite schools, you'd have 6. If you really believed that we want what's best for the kids and we want them to get all of the opportunities possible, you would have a highly qualified teacher at the front of the classroom and a very small class so that teachers could then, yes, give individualized attention to each of those kids. But that's not what we're talking about. It's not at all. What we're talking about is how to get money out of the system. I mean, when I look at all of these gimmicks and all of these schemes, it always comes back down to the dollars and cents. It always comes back down to this idea that, well, how much can I profit from it? How can we get our hands into those coffers? And look, there is a movement in this country of people who are the homeschoolers, really and I shouldn't even say the homeschoolers, because there are some who go, you know what, I think I can give my child the best education possible at home, and I'm all in favor of that. Go ahead, good for you. good luck. And some of them are really very brilliant. Then there's the other sect of the homeschoolers who say, you know what? It's all about our narrowly confined religious views. And the only thing that my kid needs is the good book. And you go, okay, well, then, find me the part of the good book that talks about math. It's not there. And then you take that to the next step. And this is where DeVos wants to go, which what this voucher thing really is about. The voucher thing isn't about you getting your kid into the prep school or the elite private school that's here now. It's about, creating those narrowly defined ideological schools that, because like she says, schools that haven't even been created yet. That's where the focus is. We're going to create a whole bunch of stuff. And it's going to be in these very narrow slivers. The one thing that I give public education really ultimate credit for is it makes us figure out how to deal with each other in a society. And understand, that there are differences, and figuring out how to navigate those differences. What I worry about is, you think about what the founders, in the Federalist Papers, what the founders' fear was. Federalist 10 was about, factioning us off, and really the end of the country being, us being killed by these factions. And, these narrowly prescribed, ideological little groups all sliced and diced and pitted against one another, and really just chaos. Well, this is what part of this education fight is about. It's about creating that world of chaos. Because then what happens when, let's say you've got the majority Christian folks saying, well, we want our sliver. And then, as I've been saying for a very long time, the fun will be, once we've decided we're a Christian nation, watching the Christians eat each other. But it's a whole other discussion for another day. But they all have their own little ideological schools, and they only understand their little ideological part. What happens when they come into the real world? What happens when they have to figure out how to get along? I mean, one of the scary things for me is you watch business owners saying, well, I shouldn't have to serve this segment of the population because it's against my religion. And you go, that's just nuts. I thought we did away with that at a certain point where we just stopped. We were above that. Evidently, we're going backwards. And right now, it's gay people. We're not going to give a wedding cake to those gay people. No wedding cake for you. Eventually, it's going to become, pick your minority segment. And again, eventually, it dwindles down to pick your minority of the majority. You've got blonde hair, no cake for you. I mean, it's crazy. Once you start down this slippery slope, just crazy. And for me, it comes back to education. Because, and I've had this conversation, 1,000 times with people thinking that they get this golden ticket. That this is it. We're going to get to go to those private schools. It's going to be great. Our kids are going to get everything they want. And, the hell with the public schools. We'll abandon them. But understand, the public schools are just going to be the dumping ground for kids who aren't quite there yet, whose parents couldn't navigate the system for, a whole bunch of reasons. That's going to be poorly funded, poorly staffed, and this is the vision. And again, this is how we divide up. This is how we divide people up. And this is how we really, honestly and truthfully, end up in a situation of being constantly pitted against one another. And as one of my Twitter folks pointed out, there are going to be a lot of private schools, but they're going to be the worst. He used a different word. He began with an S and ended with ist. But, they're going to be all of these, convenience store, Harambe kind of charter schools and alternative schools. You've heard of the Harambe school in Philadelphia that, by daytime, bad charter school. At nighttime, hopping discotheque bar. And again, this is the kind of thing you're going to see. And maybe that's what we want. Maybe there's an opportunity for parents to say, you know what, my kid's not very bright, probably going to be a stripper. Maybe, charter school during the day, strip club at night. I don't know. But this is the kind of insanity. This is the kind of craziness that we're going to see when you open this stuff up. And understand, I'm not against the idea of trying new things. There are a lot of things I would love to see attempted, but it's not for the profit motive. It's for the betterment of our society. When charter schools first came around, it's not a bad idea. For instance, I'm someone who believes there shouldn't be grades. You shouldn't have first, second, third, fourth grade because kids progress at different rates. So to have these arbitrary limits to say, well, at the end of this year, you need to know absolutely this. And if you don't know all of it and we're passed on, you've already fallen behind. So I'm of the mindset that as you get it, you move on. That to me is a very good thing. And that some kids are going to do better and they're going to be faster and they're going to go further. And that's okay. We push that. Some kids are going to take a little more time. You give them a little more help. That seems sane, seems rational. But to have these strict, parameters seems to me to be kind of crazy. So if someone said, hey, let's have a school where you're going to spend 12 years going to school here and you're going to progress at your pace, seems pretty rational. I would love to see longer school days. I'd love to see longer school years. But I'd love to see them have more hands-on experiential stuff. Go out and you want to learn about worms? Well, I'm not going to read about it in a book. Let's go out and play in the dirt. That to me seems sane and rational. And developing curriculum and developing programs that do that, like we see other countries doing, again, seems sane and rational. But again, I think we know what works. You ask any education professional, and they're going to tell you in their training, in their expertise, in what they do, what they find to have worked best. Grill and drill is not it. But what grill and drill does do, what these standardized tests and teaching to the test does, is it makes the testing companies a lot of money. Because now, 2 plus 2 is proprietary. And it's trademarked. You can no longer teach 2 plus 2 without paying us. And it just seems kind of bizarre to me that we have so many people who are so thrilled about the idea of she's going to bring us new stuff. She's going to bring us new stuff, bad stuff. And I can't help but think about her, again, one of these newfangled ideas. She's going to help cure autism. And there's actually, she actually helped fund an organization that does this. And I forget the name of it off the top of my head. But they believe that they can cure autism by having kids watch TV. And when they're no longer concentrating, they disrupt them. Yeah. So we're going to have a bunch of kids watching TV. And every time their mind wanders, we're going to smack them and make, watch TV. How nuts is that? I mean, honestly, truthfully, how nuts is that? That idea that I just laid out is now, I guess, going to be eligible for federal funding, your tax dollars. Think about that for a second. All of these, no basis in science, no basis in actually peer-reviewed science. No, I got an idea, and trust me, I've got a bunch of ideas. I don't think any of them will work educationally, but it might make some profit. This is what we're opening our education system up to. And which is why I think every week, why we have these segments every week to talk about why education is so important, why defending our public schools are so important, and why the working class of this country, this is the hill you die on. If they take this, there's nothing left. Because understand, there are no more mills, there are no more mines. Eventually, there's no more you want fries with that. We are moving to a highly technical world to where if you can't get one of the few jobs that are going to be left because of having the right education, you're certainly going to be left behind. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. Keep the faith. Keep the hope. We're back tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.